I am Tim, the Area Dean of Milton Keynes, and with me we've got Janet Nelsey, who's our Deanery Treasurer. We've got Sharon Graham-Thompson, who's one of our wonderful vicars, and we've got John Robertson, who you've already heard from, who's our Director of Ecumenical Mission. 2 years ago, Bishop Stephen, who's sitting over there, stood up at the Area Deans and Lay Chairs Day and revealed his 5 priorities at the time. As the Area Dean of Milton Keynes, I was understandably struck by the fact that one of them was to invest in Milton Keynes. I was, I said at the time, I have to confess, not entirely positive in my initial reaction. For starters, I knew that many people in the diocese would not be happy with Milton Keynes being singled out for special treatment. There's a phrase, Milton Keynes is different, which I really don't like. It represents an arrogance which I don't feel comfortable with. MK has a lot of good things going for it, but there have also been problems. My biggest concern at the time was that we had only recently recovered from a dependency culture and an unsustainable deployment, which was the legacy of the first phase of church planting in the city. And I was desperate not to go back. But, as I have said to Bishop Stephen many times, I do think this is the time to celebrate and bless Milton Keynes as our fastest growing city. And Janet's going to tell us a few reasons why.
The highly planned new city of Milton Keynes, located midway between London and Birmingham, celebrated its 50th birthday in 2017. With its system of fast roads, enclosing 40 or so grid squares, Milton Keynes' population has now reached 250,000. But it now finds itself at the heart of new plans for the Oxford-Cambridge Arc, a technology-focused university, an expressway, new rail links, and a major concentration of new housing. It's now anticipated that Milton Keynes will double its population to 500,000 by 2030. This is so far beyond the original plan of steady, mapped-out grid square growth as to be totally unrecognisable. On the edge of the Oxford Diocese, Milton Keynes will transform into a substantial regional centre, rapidly becoming more significant than it was ever intended to be. Indeed, it's already bigger in terms of population than some of the dioceses. Unfortunately, Milton Keynes' growth has come at a cost for some. As businesses boom, many people are moving deeper into disadvantage. 1 in 4 children live in poverty. Homelessness is on the rise, and house prices are out of reach for local people. The ring of grid squares around the city centre are in decline, and the suburbs have become even wealthier. Local churches need to respond with compassion, but also have the courage to challenge injustice.
And if you're wondering what that is on the screen behind us, that's one of the delivery robots that you can get your shopping delivered by in parts of Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes is different. It's a huge and rapidly growing city, which is reaching a significant turning point in terms of scale, complexity, and role. The original plans have been completed, and a time of rapid change is just beginning. Oxford Diocese has a strategic opportunity to influence the next phase of growth, and we must take it. Working Group 6 was formed to look at how we celebrate and bless Milton Keynes. CBMK has been an important project because it's brought together a number of strands that were already emerging in the deanery and in discussions with our partners. We want to make a bigger difference in the world, and this calling is reflected in the number of major mission projects that have been springing up in Milton Keynes. Our work with Citizens UK has already been mentioned. The spiritual practice of community organising is having an impact on discipleship and lay leadership, as well as helping us to work more effectively with people in need. There is, however, a need to invest in new worshipping communities. The first phase of growth was simply not completed, and the church is not growing as rapidly as the city. In the past 10 years, however, we have already launched 3 pioneer-led congregations and replanted 2 struggling congregations. Much of this has been paid for by the local deanery and our ecumenical partners. We have been doing our bit, but we need help if we are to meet the massive challenges that lie ahead. Growth in depth, impact, and numbers will need new leadership, including appropriate senior leadership. We are also hoping to launch a major prayer initiative and a local learning hub. Much of this work will involve our ecumenical partners, as John will explain.
One of the well-known features of the Church of Milton Keynes is its concentration of ecumenical partnerships in the centre. In many ways, a far-sighted commitment to an ideal, but also something of a mixed blessing when the church became focused on structures and inward-looking. The last few years, however, have seen an intentional turn outwards in mission, with all the denominations involved seeking a more dynamic response to the challenges of the city, and a desire to see Milton Keynes as a city alive to God. One of the signs of that lies in a couple of those replants and new churches Tim referred to, which have happened ecumenically with our historic partners in the denominations, and gained a richness, a breadth, and an energy that they might not otherwise have had. At the same time, we've rejoiced in working with some of the new churches that have sprung up across the city, reversing long-standing suspicions as we look to be partners together with God in building the kingdom. Great, for instance, to be able to host a prayer breakfast for civic leaders jointly with Richard, the lead pastor of one of the largest of those new churches, something that would actually have been unthinkable only 5 years ago. And we know that if we are to meet the new challenges of Milton Keynes, its growth, its changing character, its growing wealth gap, we know that we need to build up our capacity for mission. So we're looking to develop a learning hub, encouraging personal discipleship and faith learning, expanding our community organising approach for the common good, working intentionally on leadership with both lay and ordained, building teams which are sustainable into the future. All focused on mission, on making a difference in our city, which is, of course, God's city. Could even say God's own city. As we do that, together with our partners across the city, we hope and would ask you to pray that Milton Keynes becomes increasingly a city alive to God.
Tim said, I'm one of the vicars in Milton Keynes, currently working in this context. Now, I'm a sailor. My husband and I are sailors. And as we both know, sailing on your own is great fun. But actually, you sail more effectively when you have a crew, when you have a team. Now, you might have all sorts of images in your mind. When we say Milton Keynes, I bet I know what you're thinking. We're not going to mention them. But actually, there's plenty of deep water in Milton Keynes as well. And I don't just mean the lakes that are around the city. There is a lot of deep but very fruitful, lots of fish in it, mission water in Milton Keynes. And I'm sailing and fishing in one of those areas, I believe. Let me take you back, first of all, though, to 2013 on the eastern side of Milton Keynes, when a project came to fruition that had been many, many years in the planning and had emerged out of the Fresh Expressions movement. And the URC Church and the Anglican Church, together in partnership, placed a worker, a pioneer, an ordained pioneer, into one of the growing estate areas on the eastern side of Milton Keynes. It was part of the LEP, this project, and has grown over those years to now come to have grown a worshipping community of between about 50 and 60 people. And the person, Ruth, who's been working in that area, has divided her time between community engagement, using very much the citizens model we heard about earlier, as well as developing culturally appropriate ways of worshipping and being Christ-like in that area. So let's take our drone or whatever it else, or our robot, now across to the west of the city to 2019, where I'm working. We too have an incredibly quickly growing area of new development. I actually work in what is probably one of the largest parishes in the diocese by numbers of residents, which is over 50,000 residents in one parish. We are an LEP. I head up the LEP team. There are a couple of ministers. We're an ecumenical team. But we have so many more people coming, so many more people moving into the area, houses springing up. And quite frankly, up till now, we haven't really been engaging with some of that growth. Well, taking some of what's happened as our inspiration, working together with our ecumenical colleagues, working as sailors together, we are going to put out into the deep water of our new areas. And we too are looking at pioneer ministry, at growing a new worshipping community in our new and burgeoning areas, about doing some of those crazy things that we heard the bishop talking about earlier. And we need help to do that. So we will be looking at sources of funding, sources of resourcing. We'll be working together in lay and ordained teams and very much ecumenically. And I would ask you to pray for us as we, in this particular instance, sail out into deep waters.
As Sharon says, we know what's going on in people's head when you say the words Milton Keynes. We know what you're thinking about. We know the politics. We know the images. But we want you to know there is a challenge and an opportunity in Milton Keynes, which is one of those once-in-a-generation things. There is a church in Milton Keynes. We are not quite struggling, but we need help. And so this idea of a special project and a special priority for Milton Keynes, which I was so negative about 2 years ago, and I confess, and all the rest, it is something that I think is important and is a challenge to the diocese as a whole in terms of stepping out into new and deep waters with this particular area at a particular time.